Okay, good morning, Michigan. My name is Lester Brooks. I teach in the history department at Anne Arundel Community College in Arnold, Maryland, but I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, so go blue. Don't know about the Spartans though.
My name is Susan Firestone. I'm a retired patent attorney from Fort Wayne, but I grew up in the Kalamazoo, Michigan area. In about another year, I'll be moving to Grand Rapids.
Well, I have to have some Michigan connection. My name is Tim Moore. I'm from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin. I married a girl who went to Calvin College, so that might count.
Thank you for allowing us to testify before you today. We are Unit 2 from East Grand Rapids High School, composed of juniors and one sophomore. I'm Eleanor Vandermolen.
I'm Eli Huey.
I'm Isabel Ranger.
And I'm Mallory Houlihan, and we are coached by the fabulous Adam Horos and Ben Lang.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get to work here. We have Unit 2, question number 1. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin.
In 1787, Philadelphia State House hosted a Congress of 55 audacious men, each feverish with his own constitutional desires. Those oft-conflicting desires proved to be fuel for contentious disagreements at the convention. However, each disagreement proved to be the clay that would eventually be formed into the bricks of compromise that built our Constitution. As Washington describes, the gathering appears to me little short of a miracle, that the delegates from so many different states should unite in forming a system of national government with so little liable to well-founded objections.
When considering forms of representation, one issue that the founders had to navigate was whether the national legislature should more represent the people or the states. Two systems of representation were considered: William Patterson's New Jersey plan and James Madison's Virginia plan. The former provided for a unicameral Congress with equal representation for every state, essentially creating a government of governments. By contrast, the Virginia plan provided for bicameral Congress that would proportionally represent the people. After forming a specialized committee, the Great Compromise was finally reached, establishing our current system, a government that both represents the states and the people within them.
The election process of an executive was another central disagreement among the delegates. One main idea proposed was direct election by the people. George Mason likened this to referring a trial of colors to blind men, and it was roundly rejected. The Virginia plan proposed a different election process in which the state legislatures would directly elect a president. This plan was dismissed as well due to fear of collusion between state legislatures and federal government. The solution was postponed until late July when the small committee of detail created the Electoral College.
Despite significant compromises, issues such as citizenship never saw full resolution in the convention. Being decidedly left up to state governments, this irresolution had repercussions, notably the Dred Scott v. Sanford case, which held that any person of African descent could never obtain citizenship. This interpretation provoked backlash from Americans and state governments alike, leading New York to declare an attack on state sovereignty and adding to Civil War tensions. Though this flaw was later addressed by the 14th Amendment, it continues to be controversial.
Some topics, such as slavery, were so contentious that they were often indirectly addressed, such as representation being resolved through the Three-Fifths Compromise. Abolition itself was never debated. Though some Northern delegates denounced slavery as a nefarious institution, many Northern states had slaves and believed in the sanctity of property rights. Southern states feared that if slavery was abolished, their economies would crumble. This lack of confrontation perpetuated this horrific institution until the 13th Amendment. As America's constant struggles with racism and prejudice remind us, the effects of this irresolution will be perpetual.
Today, America faces some very different challenges from when it was founded, such as the need for digital privacy. Since the right to privacy is implied in our Bill of Rights, our government needs to dutifully uphold that promise to its citizens. States have been actively providing this protection, putting in place amendments such as California's Electronic Communication Privacy Act, strictly requiring state law enforcement to obtain a warrant to gain access to any online personal private information. Other countries have implemented strict personal data protections, such as the GDPR shown in the European Union. Necessary amendments in relation to digital privacy are not a result of omission at the convention, but simply due to the constant technological advancements that we are subjected to.
Another ever-challenging problem to the efficiency and credibility of our legislature are omnibus bills. A remedy to these bills would be a single subject amendment. This amendment would restrict lawmakers from proposing bills with multiple resolutions in mind, regulating Congress to prevent them from putting their own agendas into our bills. This amendment would create more efficient spending, preventing politicians from putting expensive laws into unrelated bills. This also creates a more transparent congressional agenda that's easy for the public to interpret. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Okay, we'll have some follow-up questions for you, and we'll start with Tim.
Okay, I'm going to suggest to you that the folks that showed up to Philadelphia were bad people because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Would you agree with me, or are you going to push back on me on that?
Well, I think that the omission of the abolition of slavery in particular shows that they are not the great people that we sometimes think of them as. And I think that omission leaves a lot of questions as to their morals and their ethics in regards to the creation of our government.
I think that though there were incredible shortfalls within the creation of our Constitution, I think that these men set out to create a Constitution and that they did. And we've seen this Constitution has it still is existing today, and it still has been primarily unchanged with the exception of all of our amendments. I think that they created a constitution that has held up over all of these years, and I think that it is important that we don't necessarily discredit that achievement.
Let me change it slightly. I mean, what were they sent there to do? And based upon what they were sent there to do, should we be critical?
Well, they were sent there originally to amend the Articles of Confederation, but I do not think we should be critical and completely scrapping that system of government, as we saw many issues arise, such as the lack of federal power, disallowing taxes, and the overall allowance for populists to hold high positions of power in our government.
Like my colleague said, they were sent there to amend and rewrite, obviously, the previous failure of the Articles of Confederation. And as our Constitution stands today, it does show similarities to the Articles of Confederation, but major differences, in that Constitution that we have today is still relevant.
I think that though they were sent to amend the Articles of Confederation, I think that looking back from this modern standpoint, we can see that I would like to say there was no saving the Articles of Confederation. So I think that we can't necessarily be critical that they didn't amend or fix the Articles of Confederation, because I do think that there was no possible way to fix them.
Thank you.
You mentioned a number of areas where they didn't quite finish that were rather vague. For example, what I'm thinking of right now is executive power. Do you agree that executive power was something that they didn't really tackle, or did they kick it down to later date?
I think that we have obviously seen incredible executive expansion up to today's society. I think that through the inclusion of the Take Care Clause in Article 2, Section 3, it has allowed for immense expansion of executive power. And I think that we are in an unforeseeable state. I think that the founders would never assume that we would be in the position of executive power that we experience today.
I think the allowance for the expansion of the executive branch was good foresight by our founders, because it was impossible to predict the way that we would evolve as a society and as a country. And I think that the allowance for executive expansion has allowed us to become more powerful in a world standpoint.
I think that the allowance for executive expansion has continually been beneficial to our society, because with the allowance of departments in the executive branch, such as the Department of Homeland Security, which has been made after the attacks of 9/11. Obviously, the founders did not know that that was going to happen. And I think that it's allowed a continuous benefit to our society.
With this expansion of the power of the executive, should we have more than one executive to handle all the business? And two, why do we limit the terms of the executive? If we have someone that's doing the job, elect them over and over again.
Well, we can see Hamilton write about term limits in the Federalist Papers, he thought that there shouldn't be a limit on and there shouldn't be a limit on terms, because he thought that that would create a disturbance in our government. And if were we to have a change of power at the inception of a war, it could seriously put us at a disadvantage. However, if we were able to have a president over and over again, it could lead to a singular, more powerful, in a way, sort of dictator. So I think that a limit on terms at 2 is good.
I think that it is important that we don't, as you said, just keep one person in power, because I think that obviously the ideals of representation were very vital to our founders and the creation of this Constitution. And I think that if we subjected our executive to that sort of corruption of just having one executive over a long period of time, I think that it would sort of go against a lot of the desires and the beliefs of our founders. And I think that it would sort of infringe on this vital component of representation in our government.
And although the president may be getting things done, like you stated in your question, with the growing polarization of the parties today, people of America aren't always going to agree on what is getting done, essentially, or what they enjoy about our president. And so switching it up and having term limits are beneficial.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I mean, to circle back around to Lester's, the first part of his question, how does this panel feel about multiple presidents?
I think that the inclusion of multiple presidents could be a good idea. However, the hyperpolarization of our country and of our government could lead to essentially a presidential board gridlocking itself if there was an even amount. So if you were to do that, you would need to include something similar to Pennsylvania pre-Constitution, where you have a panel of 5 presidents.
I would like to disagree with Eli. I think that having plural executives, I think that as we amend our Constitution and as we make changes to our government, it is important that we still keep the ideas and the intents of our framers in mind. And I think that the framers had the experience of witnessing the Pennsylvania's state constitution. And I think that they obviously did not choose to move forward with that structure. And I think that it is important that we consider their reasoning for not moving forward with that structure. And we consider that that would be harmful to our government.
As Alexander Hamilton states in Federalist 70 that we do need this energetic executive in power, I think that this singular executive that we have seen since the beginning of our Constitution and this convention, that this singular executive has worked, and its expansion of power has, although expanded largely what the founders intended it to be, it has worked as a singular executive. So I think that adding more executives would not fulfill the duties that the founders agreed upon.
Let me quickly throw out a quick question. Why didn't the founders just solve the slavery issue right then and there? You pointed out some issues that came later. Why not just solve it then? Then we wouldn't have had some of those issues.
Well,
The Constitutional Convention The Constitutional Convention was illegal at the time, and they needed everyone to agree on one constitution to repair the articles. And if the Southern states wouldn't agree to fix slavery and end slavery, that's what they were feared, that the Southern states would leave and not eventually sign the Constitution.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now have some feedback from the judges. Okay, Tim.
Okay, your opening statement was very clear, easy to follow. Thank you. I'm intrigued by your let's hone in this privacy with some legislation and clarifying the warrant problem that's vexing. I'm also intrigued by your proposal to bust up omnibus bills. But part of me is with you on that, but I don't know. But the fact that you're thinking about omnibus bills, I might disagree with you on your solution. But the fact that you're thinking about omnibus bills is I really that's very thought provoking. I got to think about that a little bit. I think you're in the follow-ups. I think you're thoughts about polarization and how that may prevent, it might be deadly if we went to a plural executive. So I thought, and also your discussion about term limits, the pros and cons on that, on the executive was thought provoking. So I appreciated very much this conversation.
I did too. I enjoyed your opening statement where you started with the audacious 55 audacious men turning claim to bricks of compromise. Well, I don't know who thought of that, but that was really nicely written. You brought us through, I thought, and did a very nice job of setting up your opening statement, and you brought us through where I think you wanted us to go. But I like the fact that you mentioned the digital privacy needs. That maybe, I mean, these are things nobody could have even considered or thought about 50 years less now, much less. And then you also then brought ideas on what you had, the California bill, the European Union bill on. And I agree with the Omnibus bill. That was nice. I wish we had more time to really flesh some of this information out. I'm sure you don't wish that. But, and I thought we have a budding lawyer, because I heard at least one person argue both sides of the issue. And when I hear however as a lawyer, I'm like going to hear that second side coming in. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed my time with you. It was fun.
Yeah, I'll echo my colleagues that I like that introduction, that bricks of compromise. That's great. In fact, I think there's some people in DC that need to relearn that right now. You also touched on a lot of good things, the New Jersey plan, Virginia plan, and you gave a clear explanation of that and talked about the Great Compromise. I love that reference to George Mason, because that's just a classic. You know, with the election of a president, might as well give it to a blind man of color. So a great quote from George Mason. I like that you disagree, and it shows that you're thinking about these issues and you have your own individual ways of looking at things. You talked about that right to privacy as a change, and we are in this period with this computer, and we don't know where it's going, and how do you protect privacy in this day and age. And you touched on a lot of interest. The conversation really was flowing, and it could have gone on forever. So thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you.